Okay. And it was a good agreement, but still, it wound up taking, basically, each one was going to be part of the.
Hi, how you doing? I said hi when you were talking, but I said yes. Thank you. How you doing? Your makeup looks good. Yes, I saw your husband drop you off, so that's good. He's driving and everything. That's good. Good.
Yeah, the mall is real nice up there. I like the mall.
Hey, Craig.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board meeting for February the 19th, 2025, and we'll call this meeting to order. Go by a roll call of our members. Anaskevich?
Here.
Gippin?
Here.
Peebles?
Here.
Hawkins?
Here.
Castle?
Here.
Costa?
Present.
Jones?
Here.
Boyd here. Ms. Richards?
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Good to see you.
You too. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'd like to make a motion to approve last meeting's minutes. Do I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you so much. Now we'll go into reading our values and purpose statement. The overarching mission of the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board is to foster conditions and police practices that ensure the safety of all residents of the city of Akron. The CPOB is empowered by a new charter provision to independently direct the police auditor, whose office reviews investigations into complaints and misconduct involving officers. The board and the auditor also review every standard investigation, whether by the Akron Police Department or outside agencies, into the use of deadly force by an officer. Our values are as follows. Our decisions and actions are motivated by our love for Akron and our desire for all to feel safe in the community. We value unity in voice and action. We respect each other and those we serve. We seek to build relationships of trust, and we seek always to conduct ourselves with integrity. We listen to understand, learn, and lead. We strive to be inclusive of all stakeholders' voices. We value change at a system level. We hold ourselves accountable for our actions and deeds, and we hold our partners and those who we serve accountable to their actions and deeds as well. So now we'll move over to you, Ms. Anaskevich.
Yes. For a public comment, we unfortunately, and I apologize, we only had one form available, so, and it was too late to make some at this late hour. But if someone else after Mr. David Garan speaks, if there's someone else who wants to speak, just walk up to the podium when he's finished.
Yeah.
Mr. Garan, please.
Good evening. I submitted a complaint to the Akron Police Department through, and also sent a copy to the auditor. And I just received a response. What happened was a police officer was behind me. I noticed he was on his cell phone. I took a picture of him when we were at a stoplight, proceeded down to the next stoplight, still on the cell phone the whole time. So my complaint was, citizens are not allowed to use a handheld cell phone. And the way he was talking on the phone, it looked pretty obvious it was not police business. So I got a response from Deputy Chief, I don't know, Jesse L., I don't know, can't tell his handwriting. They reviewed the complaint of the Deputy Chief of Uniform Subdivision. The complaint does not meet the criteria for further investigation for the following reasons. The Ohio Revised Code 4511.204, driving while texting excludes police officers in the law, allowing officers to use electronic wireless communication devices. Now, I just got this letter in the mail today, So I haven't had a chance to look up that law, that state law. But I would hope that it says only for police business, which this looked like it wasn't police business. I'll further look into it, but I would suggest if it does allow police officers to use handheld phones, then you guys, I think you could make a point to our state legislators to change that law, if that allows them to do that. They should be treated just like civilians are. This was not police business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karan. Is there anyone else?
Hello, I'm Leah Holden. I'm speaking for the Criminal Justice Committee of the Akron NAACP. We know that you already have a lot on your plate, but there's been a recent change in legislation that allows police departments to charge citizens for body-worn camera footage. And we hope that you will, as that policy gets implemented in Akron, we hope that you will keep an eye on it and make sure that it's fair to citizens and that it doesn't impede access to the footage that might be very important to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Lucy?
Good evening. My name is Brian Lucy, president of Akron FOP 7. I'm here tonight to talk about, I guess, a couple things you guys mentioned at your last meeting. There were concerns about why the 2 second shifts on our police department are so young. I would encourage each and every one of you to come to a ride-along, talk to the officers, get to know them, maybe get some firsthand knowledge as to why that is the way that it is. Secondly, our seniority ID number may not mean anything to you, but it means something to the officer. It means something to the officer's family. Getting a day shift job Monday through Friday, or day shift hours, not being on nights for 20 plus years, may not be important to this board, but it most definitely is important to our membership. I know that was a concern you had as well. Why are senior officers not on those night shifts? Okay, so our ID number does mean something to somebody, even though it's not this board. We also talk about staffing. I'm going to give you some numbers real quick. In 2022, we had 19 resignations. In 2023, we had 17 resignations. In 2024, we had 22 resignations. That's 59 officers that have resigned from our department in 3 years. Probably cost $100,000 to get an officer fully trained from the time they start the recruitment process, the testing process, all the background process, the police academy. So before they hit the streets, the city's investing probably close to $100,000 in that individual. We had 59 individuals leave in 3 years. It's $5.9 million of experienced officers that are leaving Akron, going to a community that supports the work that they do when they're forced to make split-second decisions. All right? It's easy, everyone on this board, it's easy to sit here and talk about what de-escalation is, but on January 22nd, at Councilman Garrett's meeting, you guys were put to the test for de-escalation. How well did you do? They didn't want to hear what Auditor Fennell had to say. They didn't want to hear what Bob Gippen had to say when it came to his presentation. They wanted just to scream and shout about how they hate the police, and then they turned their attention to me and carried on and tried to get their 15 minutes of fame. These are the individuals that the city of Akron, this board, continue to pander to. There's more than 200 people that hate the police in this city. So it's time to maybe start reaching out to those individuals to get some of that information. Because what I saw was the mob take over that meeting and chaos essentially took over. That's something we can't have as police officers in this city. Everyone on this board talks about collaboration. So again, I'm encouraging each and every one of you to start sign up and take some ride-alongs. Get to know the officers. Don't just show up at roll call once every 6 months and talk about how you support the police, because that most definitely is not the case. Thank you.
Chairman, I wonder if I might ask Mr.
No, hey, Mr. Gippen, Mr. Gippen, Mr. Gippen, Mr. Gippen, Mr. Gippen.
Yes.
We'll address that another time.
Yes. Next. Thank you, Mr. Lucy.
Good evening, Board. I
evening.
wasn't intending to speak tonight, but I wanted to respond to Mr. Lucy. I don't look at it the same way he does at all about the resignations. I am concerned about officers leaving because there's no proper guidance in the use of force policy on when it's appropriate to use force. There seems to be a lack of support at the middle management level when these investigations are done, that clearly the officers have used excessive force, and yet they're not held accountable at the middle management level. So that layer of supervisory expertise is not being used to properly train and guide new officers on what's appropriate. And if a new officer comes to work for Akron, I want them to have a good experience. But they need to learn what is right and what is good for the community. And if they're not receiving that, then yeah, they're going to quit, because they can look around and see a department that gives them good guidelines, holds them to high standards. And I'm a resident of Akron. I would not recommend for someone to come work for Akron Police Department, because I worry about the leadership sending a message that it's not right for the community to have high expectations of its own police department, that there's no expectation that the FOP consider what the community needs, and that supporting the police does not mean letting them do whatever they want to do in whatever situation that unfolds. There has to be a standard, and I support the police. I would argue with him that the people who were at the meeting showed a lot of passion around having some say in how our own police department handles themselves in the community. I did not view that it got out of control. Nobody got shot. So I think that Mr. Lucy maybe doesn't understand what it means to hear from the community, hear what they're passionate about, listen to what they're saying about how they want their police department to treat their citizens. Some of the citizens in that room have endured extremely painful situations at the hands of officers, and they're struggling to understand how come those officers aren't held accountable in the way that makes sense to them. I feel that. I felt that in that room. I did not at all feel it was out of control. I felt that people who came maybe had a different expectation about what the meeting was going to involve. And what ended up happening was a very authentic, honest confrontation of what is represented sometimes by the FOP. Thank you.
Thank you. What's your name, ma'am?
Jennifer Boswell.
Thank you, Ms. Boswell. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak for 3 minutes?
Mr. Gippen, I was going to let public comment get done, then you can go ahead
It's
and
no
ask your
problem.
question.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm Reverend John Beatty, a resident of Akron. I was at that meeting also, and I too did not see that meeting as a mob taking over the meeting. What I heard were people who had lost family members who were present at that meeting, expressing their grief in the strongest possible way when their loved ones had been killed by the Akron Police Department. I did not see that as a mob taking over that meeting. I felt there was a lot to be learned. And apparently, Mr. Busey did not learn from that meeting. He listened, I thought, very respectfully. But now he's talking about the mob taking over that meeting. There were people who were killed by your fellow officers, Mr. Busey. And after I found out about this man that was killed this week. I called Mr. Busey, and I'm still waiting for him to return the call. We need an honest, meaningful, respectful dialogue between the police and the residents like me. I would appreciate that return phone call, Mr. Busey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Beatty. Beatty, I'm sorry. Anyone else? Okay, I think that concludes public
Skipper.
comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, let me, I wanted to say to Mr. Lucy, main thing was that I did go for a ride-along quite early after being appointed, and I thought it was a very meaningful experience for me, and I thought was a good interaction with the officers that night. And they were relatively young, and we did talk about their careers. And I'd had some other interactions with members of the department, you know, particularly early on. And I wanted to say, you know, I would very much want to ride along again and have other communications. Candidly, I have had, and I've mentioned this a couple of times to folks, I have candidly felt that perhaps my doing that would not be welcome, and I have not pursued the point. So what I was going to say to Mr. Lucy was that just that I would welcome it, and I would hope that his members, our officers, would also want to resume having that kind of communication with me, including, and probably would go out at night again, you know, that kind of ride-along experience. In light of the comments that were made, you know, we talked about that meeting, you know, at our last meeting, and there are ways in which I think we all felt that could have been improved upon. I don't think it turned into any sort of active discord. And what I do want to say is, and I said this to Mr. Lucy that evening, you know, as I was going out, I thought he handled himself extremely well. Both in terms of the listening that Reverend Beatty talked about, but he also did finally engage with people, and I thought did so very well and very constructively, and I said that to him and congratulated him for how he handled that meeting, and I meant it.
Thank you, Mr. Gippen. Right, now we're going to move into our committee report outs. First, we have our auditor, Mr. Fennell.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Got a couple of reports I want to go through, but before I excuse me, begin with that, I want to give a little update on where we are in some of our projects. I don't think I provided a copy to everyone, and forgive me for that, but I had a copy of a proposed RFQ for our case management and database system. We did discuss it earlier this week at the, earlier last week.
I was going to report on that at governance.
You will? Okay, I'll save it for then. Okay. Don't want to take anything away from the governance report out. Second is our interns. Well, our intern, we have an intern that we have selected. She is working through her school and with HR to complete her paperwork and prepare a work schedule that aligns with her school schedule. We'll talk more about the intern in our executive session. I did want to point out to the public that we have selected an intern. I've started my review of the Jalen Walker shooting.
Mr. Fennell, excuse me. The intern, are you able to say what school she's coming from? They're coming from?
Bucktown.
Bucktown High School?
Bucktown. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. With Jalen Walker. So I'm awaiting a response for the final report from the internal affairs from OPSA. And once I get that final report, I can begin my review completely. I have the body-worn camera footage, but I need the report as well to go along with that. RFQ for independent legal counsel. We received 4 letters of intent. board members and myself worked with the law department, and we interviewed interested firms, completed those interviews today, and a decision will be coming forth hopefully by this Friday on the next steps on which firm we would like to move forward with. And it's pretty much the highlights there. So on to the reports that I either had recommendation, concurred with the findings, but also had additional recommendation, or did not concur with the findings from the supervisory review. The first is a citizen complaint that I received, and the incident happened on December 6th of 2024. And this was related to the Jasmine Tucker shooting. It was after the shooting. An individual called into the detective bureau, and a citizen called in and wanted the name of the officer involved in the shooting. This was about a week after the shooting. And at that time, APD was not releasing the name. The mayor had a press conference, stated they would not release the name. There were some concerns for officer safety, so APD was not releasing that name. Well, this individual continued to call back, and his complaint was with the officer that answered the phone. And number one, the officer that, he had 3 chief complaints. The officer that answered the phone would not identify the officer involved in Jasmine Tucker shooting, and that the officer that answered the phone didn't identify themselves, and that the officer that answered the phone hung up on him. So the complaint was received by another supervisor and forwarded to a lieutenant for investigation. So the conclusion of the findings were that the findings were, for the complaint itself, was exonerated. That yes, the actions had occurred, but there was justification for the officer not providing the involved officer's name, which was the directive from the mayor and the chief not to release that information, and that the officer did not provide their name, and the lieutenant specifically stated that under normal circumstances, officers are required to identify themselves by their surnames only when answering the DB desk phone. But given the current circumstances, to include the vast number of threats posted online, threatening to murder a cop a day, kill cops' children, and so on, I did not have an issue whatsoever that the officer did not give his surname. In fact, I will continue to order him to not do so when working the DB desk, given the constant threats of physical violence that our officers face. So, again, my issue was not necessarily with that statement. My issue was with the statement that further along in the official paperwork that was prepared by the lieutenant, he stated, "I will not tolerate my officers being treated with anything but respect." And so I took an issue with that statement because it introduces a subjective perspective regarding how officers should be treated, which may be seen as inconsistent with professional and objective reporting standards. So the issues highlighted were the inclusion of his personal feelings into an official police report, and the free speech considerations, where the First Amendment protects individuals' rights to verbally protest and challenge police actions, even in a manner that may be considered disrespectful. And while I understand from the human side, no one wants to be verbally disrespected, as a public official, as a government official, a police officer surely is, that is free speech protection under the First Amendment, to simply curse at an officer or be rude at an officer. There are exceptions, but none of those were involved in this. So my recommendations are that the lieutenant receive counseling to include maintaining a professional tone in reports, Avoid including personal opinions or emotional statements in official documents. Focus on objective facts, findings, and policy justifications. Secondly, training and guidance for the lieutenant to maintain neutrality in official communications, especially regarding public interactions and free speech issues, and acknowledgement of public rights, reinforcing training and policy documents that the public has the right to express dissent, even disrespectfully, as long as it does not cross the line into illegal conduct, and also reinforcing training and policy documents that the public has the right to know who they are speaking to when calling APD for assistance or to ask a question. An APD employee must provide such information when asked by members of the public under normal circumstances. If an APD employee feels that providing such information, their safety would be threatened, then the employee's supervisor should intercede to handle the call. I'll pause right there for any questions.
Mr. Chairman, not so much a question. This was discussed in review committee, and I was the only member, so I suppose. But we discussed it at length, and some revisions were made from the initial draft, reflecting my thoughts on it and those of the members of the public that were there and participated, and I appreciate those changes being made. So I would recommend that or move that this board approve Mr. Fennell's report and recommendation in that manner.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, we'll roll call vote. Aniskevich?
Yes.
Gippin?
Yes.
Peebles?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Motion passes.
Ms. Richards is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Richards.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Vote
Mis-
passes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm looking at the agenda here. I need to respond to something that was said in public comment, so whenever you feel the time is right for me to say something, I'll.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You can go ahead and say it.
When you say it
Are you,
now?
are you,
You can go ahead and say it.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to respond to Mr. Lucy's comment about the rookie officers working night shift. That was me who made that comment. And the gist of my comment, if he listened attentively or want to go back and look at it on YouTube, what I said was, one, I worked for Akron Police for 12 years, so I know what the value of seniority is there. I know that the senior officers deserve to work the shifts that they choose to work. And what I said, the gist of what I said was, if you have too many young rookie officers who are still learning, all on the night shift, maybe they could offer incentives for some of the older officers to work the night shifts here and there, maybe 6 months or something, maybe offer them extra vacation days or something like that to try to help them learn what they need to learn, maybe a little more from the senior officers. That was the gist of what I said. I understand seniority. Believe me, I understand it. Like I said, I worked there for 12 years, and when you earn a day shift, you want to have that day shift. I get that, but I was just throwing out ideas that maybe that they could engage in to get some of the senior officers to work with some of the younger officers who may be struggling, But to have two rookie officers working the night shift by themselves and trying to learn from each other what they don't know, I just don't think that's a good idea, and that was my point. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you, Ms. Aniskevich. Mr. Fennell, anything else?
Yes, the second report where I did not agree with the findings, it occurred June 28th, 2024. It involved a traffic stop where the two brothers in the vehicle, they were twins, and the driver was removed from the vehicle. I believe his license was suspended. The tags on the car had long expired. So had no question, no concerns with the traffic stop. But during the course of the traffic stop, the passenger initially offered his ID to an assisting officer who instructed him to provide his ID to the officer that was engaged with the driver. So, of course, the officer that was engaged with the driver did not take the ID right away. So after a few minutes, the assisting officer requests the ID, to which the passenger asked, well, you told me you wouldn't take it before, you told me to give it to him, indicating to the initial officer. Well, they went back and forth for a few moments on why he needed the ID, why things had changed, and so forth. And at some point, the assisting officer told the passenger to exit the vehicle. Now, mind you, they were pulled over in front of their home. That's where they stopped. And the passenger asked why. You know, why do I have to get out of the car? And at that point, things went really downhill. The assisting officer was joined by other officers and informed the passenger that basically because I said so, I have the authority to remove you from the car, and now I'm going to take you from the car. So, as you can imagine, it resulted in a physical use of force where several officers were trying to pull the passenger out of the car. Several punches were thrown by the first assisting officer. Ultimately, the passenger was pulled from the car and he was punched several times in the face and body. And one punch that was very concerning to me, there many were, but one that was extremely concerning and could have proven to be lethal, because it did cause serious injury, was when the passenger was on the ground, his head was against the ground, albeit it was grass, but it was still hard on the ground, and he received a direct punch to his face, which rendered him unconscious for a few seconds. They were able to handcuff him, but the passenger sustained facial lacerations, broken nose, contusions, and a concussion. So the use of force was deemed by the supervisor that investigated as objectively reasonable. Prior to the supervisor conducting his investigation, he did do an after-action review with the officers on the scene where they discussed options to the use of force. But I found that kind of troubling because nowhere in that debrief did the supervisor discuss the option of reassessing and explaining better why the person had to get out of the car. The passenger did not understand or even know that they were going to tow the car. So that was never told to him. It was just told to get out. And when he asked why, instead of saying because the tags are expired, there's no insurance on the car, we have to tow the car, he was told because I said so, get out, I can remove you. So that was a missed opportunity for de-escalation. And there are numerous missed opportunities where I think it was the officers, I mean, obviously, people can say the passenger should have just gotten out of the car, but at the same time, the officer should have recognized that there was some kind of miscommunication there and could have given a better explanation. Other responding officers could have recognized that this individual officer wasn't communicating properly with the gentleman, and they could have interceded. But there were phrases that were made of, why are you being difficult with me now, instead of trying to open up clear communication. So missed opportunities for de-escalation, lack of justification for the escalation. I mean, this was a verbal exchange that somehow ended up with a person being beaten. They never threw a punch, they never kicked or anything. And then the use of force itself, like I said, it caused serious injuries. He was concussed, broken nose and lacerations, and he could have developed a brain bleed and or, had much more serious injury. And he didn't pose a physical threat. And then, of course, the deficiencies in the debrief. So, it's the reasonableness of force, communication failures, and failure to de-escalate. So my recommendation is that the finding be changed from objectively reasonable to not objectively reasonable, and take appropriate disciplinary action as warranted by such a disposition. Emphasize de-escalation techniques and training programs, including strategies for effective communication and calming agitated individuals, and reinforce the importance of using de-escalation as the primary approach before resorting to physical force. Make sure that officers understand and adhere to the departmental policies on the use of force and de-escalation, and conduct periodic reviews of use of force incidents to assess adherence to the policy and identify areas for improvement. And accountability measures, consider disciplinary action or remedial training for the officer based on the apparent misuse of force and failure to de-escalate, as well as reinforce supervisory responsibilities during debriefs to include a thorough discussion of de-escalation and decision-making. Document and address any gaps in training or performance revealed during these reviews, and which we're working towards is OIPA, CPOB, and APD work together to review and amend the APD Directive P2021-013, resisting arrest, use of force procedure as needed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I concurred fully with the report and recommendation in review, and I move that we approve it.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second,
Anaskevich?
yes.
Gippin?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Motion passes. Is that the end of your report, Mr. Fennell?
Well, one other quick thing. I don't know if you've noticed, I submitted a couple of reports a few months back, and I've been in communications with APD on when I should expect their response. And so we've exceeded the 45 days, and we all understand that. But those responses are forthcoming. There were some specific recommendations and actions that I had recommended, and I believe that, my belief is that, and within some of those responses, maybe those actions have been taken care of. So once I get those responses, I will provide those to the board for review.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Fennell before we move forward? Thank you for your report out, Mr. Fennell. Now we'll go over to Mr. Gippin in governance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Fennell was beginning to describe, he had presented an RFQ, I guess, for consulting services related to the software, and we discussed it in governance, and with the understanding there were going to be some amendments made by Mr. Fennell in the draft that is actually brought to the board. I actually have not seen the revision, but I trust that they are what he was describing. The intention would be to move, and I would move approval, assuming there's a second, but that would then, and it could be discussion tonight, but would move that the action on it be tabled pending hopefully approval of the budget, since this is dependent on that. So I'll move approval of the RFQ that Mr. Fennell has described.
Get a second?
Second.
Any further discussion regarding tabling this?
Well, I was leaving it open for discussion if anybody had questions about it tonight, but otherwise to table.
Yeah, I think from a budget standpoint, my preference would be to table, consistent with what you're saying, just to until we see how everything shakes out. But yes.
Okay. It seemed very straightforward, frankly, Mr. Chairman, when it was presented in governance.
And I think the RFQ is solid, and I'm lockstep in terms of what I think that we need it, but I just don't want us to get ahead of ourselves before we know exactly what the resources available.
Right. So now I'll move to table, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Anaskevich?
Yes.
Gippin?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, otherwise, we, had considerable discussion about the use of force policy review, and I think that there were several members of the public there from various organizations and just on their own behalf, and again, very, very useful. We took no position concerning the proposals that have been made, but had a lot of discussion about it. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I might just personally make a statement about my views concerning the review.
Mr. Gippen?
Again, this is not an action of the Governance Committee, but, and I expressed this that night, that I think that the critical thing is that this review happen. And of course, very, very pleased, as I've said before, that the administration has undertaken this. And that in my mind, even though there are, of course, legitimate questions about the choice of a consultant, the cost involved, these are all appropriate to be discussed. But in my mind, if this particular proposal is the one that the administration feels is the right one for this work, they are the ones who will have to, ultimately carry the recommendations into effect. And I think, again, I say this just personally, that I hope that the administration's proposal will ultimately be approved and soon, so that we can get on with it.
Thank you, Mr. Gippen.
Thank you for allowing me to make that statement.
Absolutely.
And no other report from the committee.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Gippen and the Governance Committee? If not, we will move on to Ms. Jones with Community Engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On January 29th, and I'm going to actually ask Ms. Myers to kind of go into some detail, but on January 29th, we had a really good meeting where we, debriefed a little bit about the community meeting that was held on January 22nd, and then we also talked a lot about, so how do we go forward, what is our role, and how can we be most relevant and effective in really, we talked about developing in relationships of trust. What kind of dialogue can we have? What kind of structured dialogues we can put together in order to do that? And so, so we have a plan. Again, I'm going to let Ms. Myers talk a little bit more about what the specifics of those plans are. But it basically entails having discussion circles. Maybe naming the whole project something so that we talked about, some buzzwords, trust, unity, other words, so that we can have a whole community engagement project, movement, if you will, that would involve all the stakeholders, including the community, our elected officials, our law enforcement officers, everything, and then before we have those circles, to basically do some training of facilitators so that, when we have the circles, the facilitators can be trained to make sure that the dialogues are respectful, that every voice is heard, that it's structured, and that we record the appropriate parts of the circles so that we can get meaningful results as a result from having people come together to really share not only their input as to what should be done, but basically to share who they are. We don't know the officers don't know the community. How can we really structure those circles so that we can get to know each other and hopefully, use that as a foundation for building relationships of trust so that we can all work together to make Akron safer.
I'm not sure how much more I can add to that, but I think during the public comment, a gentleman, I think it was the Reverend, said we need to have meaningful dialogue, right? So that's exactly what we want to have. We're looking to have a cohort so we're looking at doing this in phases, if you will. So the first phase would be a cohort where we identify those key stakeholders who would not only experience the restorative justice circle aspect, but also be trained facilitators so that moving forward, we can have that meaningful dialogue and create a safe space for those key stakeholders and the community to sit down and let's really have, flesh out those key areas that we really need for this review. So we have another meeting scheduled for next Thursday, another community engagement meeting. We plan to name and frame this. We're hoping that some things will spawn organically from the cohort. We're planning to have that actual cohort on March 15th at Ed Davis from 10 to 2 p.m. I have been able to secure Ed Davis, so that is the official location where we will plan. We're looking to have about 20 or so, 20 to 22 individuals participate. So again, to experience the circle, but also be trained to facilitate these much-needed discussions and important discussions going forward.
That's true.
Any questions?
And I'd like to add, I'd just also like to add that in order to get this cohort that we're talking about, we've asked people to maybe recommend 3 people that they might know who would be interested in facilitating circles and going through the training that we're talking about on March 15th. And the hope is that we get a diverse array of folks so that, again, to build relationships of trust, we want representation from as many different stakeholders as possible to lead the circles.
Ms. Hawkins?
I couldn't hear you well, so I just wanted to hear the date and time again.
For the cohort?
Yeah.
March 15th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Ed Davis Communities.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And again, we want this to be kind of the beginning of an ongoing process. We don't want to be a one and done. We realize that these conversations will be heavy, so we want to, take our time and move at a good pace and move together.
I would just like to recommend that either Mr. Lucy or someone from the FOP be invited, as I'm sure that you all have probably thought about that already, to facilitate just what he was speaking to earlier.
Absolutely. We put a lot of thought into what would be an appropriate invitation, right? We don't want it to be something stale. We want it to, for all stakeholders that, as you mentioned, FOP, law enforcement, to really understand that we're all kind of working towards the same goal. We may have different strategies of how to get there, but, we definitely want to have that invitation be purposeful.
Yeah. And I would say that not only would it be ideal for us to make sure that the invitation to the circles and to the dialogues is spread broadly so that, we get a diverse array of folks in the circle, but I would even say that it would be ideal if we had some police officers who went through the training to actually help facilitate the circles.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Maybe this happened and I missed it and is intended, but I think these meetings need to be noticed under sunshine. And that will also have the advantage of, you may get good participation that you didn't know about, but I think they need to be noticed meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Gippen.
Question, are you speaking of the community engagement meetings or what
The
meetings?
meetings you've described, they need to be public meetings.
Oh, going forward?
Well, the past is the past, but going forward, they certainly need to be noticed under sunshine.
Are you saying the community engagement, Mr. Gippen?
What has been described, I think, are meetings of community engagement and broadly, and again, Ms. Matz can speak to it, but we need to err on the side of compliance, and these strike me as public meetings.
So the meeting that we're having next Thursday is our community engagement subcommittee meeting,
Yes.
which will be noticed, right? I believe that our community engagement that they're describing are circles that we're going to have some constructive, if you will, much-needed dialogue, that I don't think those are necessarily, those are
No,
not
I think Mr. Gippen is saying that
I won't say anything
planning
more about it. I think it'd be well advised to talk to Ms. Matz about this. What struck me was that these fell into the category, but I'm not the lawyer.
And
think-
basically, you're saying the planning meetings should be noticed, is what you're saying? Okay,
It's up to Ms. Mance.
okay.
I think of it as a safe rule of thumb, generally, if we're going to have 3 or more board members participating in any one session meetup, then generally we may, it's on the safer side to notice that.
But next Thursday is a planning meeting, correct?
Yes.
That we'll notice?
Yes.
Okay.
We will now.
All right. Oh, thank you. I thought she was talking about
The
thank you, Mr.
circles.
Gibbon.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments for the committee? All right, if not, I'm going to go to Mr. Costa in Finance, if you have anything.
Yep, so I want to do 2 things. First, I want to provide an update on the fiscal year 2025 budget process. And then second, add some context with respect to the budget, the 2025 budget as proposed. So on January 29th, our board passed and approved our fiscal year 2025 budget in the amount of $965,871. The city of Akron is going to be having budget hearings that will take place during March 3rd, 4th, and 5th. To my understanding, the schedule as to which departments will be having hearings have not been finalized just yet, but we will be invited at some point to present our budget during one of those days. And so, you know, subsequent to that, the hearings, the budget will be presented to City Council. Ms. Matz, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the city's budget as a whole needs to be approved by the end of March. That's correct. Okay, so by the end of March, we should know where we're at with respect to our proposed budget, and whether or not it's been approved in whole, in part, or in any other form. Second, I wanted to provide a little bit of context with respect to our budget as proposed. The budget and the amount that I stated earlier was a 52% increase from our current budget. The budget as increased it accounts for an increase in overall operations, the addition of staff, a one-time cost for a case management system, as well as a one-time cost for software to help expedite our review of body-worn cameras. The budget as proposed, from what I understand, makes up about a 1%, 1.1% of what APD's proposed budget is, to which I understand to be for the fiscal year 2025 in the amount of about $88 million. And so I see our proposed budget, while some folks may question the extent to which it's being sought that we increase it, as really a return on investment. And as Mr. Fennell has educated me, the norm nationally is that oversight boards' budgets are generally between 1 and 1.5% of APD of the accompanying police force's budget. And so I just wanted to provide that context. I would ask that members, to the extent that you have relationships with city council members and folks that will be hearing and ultimately voting on our budget, that you advocate on behalf of the budget as proposed. We have a number of community members who often ask, how can we support you? Reach out to your council member and please ask them that they support our increased budget. Ultimately, you know, while I understand that the city, like all of us, are feeling the increased cost of operation and inflation as a whole, again, we see this as a return on investment and as an opportunity to help prevent potential costly incidents and even potential tragedies within the community by helping this board to enhance its ability to make recommendations to city council and the mayor's office that have been informed by enhanced tools. And so those are the 2 things that I wanted to do. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And also, I wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Fennell for his assistance in helping to craft the budget, as well as the finance department and their support in getting back to us and helping to address some of our questions.
Mr. Costa, I have a couple of questions really quick. So when I'm looking at just new money that's a one-time expense, that's under the service contract where it's the 170, is that correct?
What line item
The
are you looking at?
8,000, 80,000, I'm sorry.
80,000. For everyone's context, this is in the supplemental packet towards the end.
Yeah, the service contracts.
Service contracts. So the consulting services. That is correct, I believe. Yes.
Okay, all right. Because, yeah, it's showing, I'm seeing it as new money. I just want to make sure I'm reading it right.
Yeah,
To the
so,
software and the consultant.
yes, as well as the information technology.
Gotcha. And the same thing on the back under contractual obligations, 88, line item 88,000.
Yes, that reflects costs associated with for legal services.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Costa?
I just wanted to say that, just point out that the sort of primer that we have on Akron's return on investment is good, so that as we go forward and try to support and advocate for this budget, there's some good talking points here, so thank you for that.
Well
Yeah,
done.
no, that's, again, Mr. Fennell's.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Fennell.
Yeah, well done. All right, if there isn't any more questions for Mr. Costa and Finance, now we'll go to Ms. Richards and Human Resources. Did you have anything, Ms. Richards?
Yes, I have two items. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One is our Human Resource Committee. I believe the only two members are me and Ms. Anaskevich, and I didn't know if we wanted to have at least one more member for that committee.
Any comments?
I have a comment about that. If we have something coming up, Ms. Richards, something pending, where we know we're going to need extra hands and eyes on something, maybe that would be the better time to ask somebody to join us, rather than have some...
In particular, we are coming up on Mr. Fennell's evaluation,
Okay.
his one-year evaluation, so that was my thought process behind talking about that right now.
Okay, and when is that due?
This was my second item. I emailed you all this afternoon with the proposed evaluation form and a schedule, asking each member to fill out any information that they wanted on the form to be returned to the HR committee by March 3rd. Then we would compile all the feedback and have it ready for the board to approve on March 17th. And then Mr. Boyd could present the evaluation after that point.
Okay, I didn't see the email, but I'll look at it and I'll do my evaluation. But that was just my suggestion, maybe give folks a couple days or a couple weeks to decide, look at their own schedules and see if they could join us.
Yeah,
At
it's
least
not
one
a
other person.
really when we started, it was a very time-intensive subcommittee, but now that we have all our employees in place, it is truthfully not a heavy lift at this point.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'll take the third seat for the time being, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. If Ms. Richards, if you don't find anybody, I'll be glad to jump on the third seat. If Mr. Gippen, so Mr. Gippen said he'll be more than welcome to jump on that, Ms. Richards.
Great, thank you so much. And so then the final thing was your emails. I have a proposed schedule and the evaluation form. I was going to ask each board member, as well as Mr. Fennell, to fill it out and return the information to me by March 3rd. You don't have to fill out everything if you don't have knowledge of it, but those areas that you would like to comment on, please do. And then we as a subcommittee will compile everybody's comments to make a comprehensive evaluation for Mr. Fennell.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Ms. Richards. Any further questions or comments from Ms. Richards?
Yeah, just quick question. So our new proposed budget calls for the addition of a data analyst too. Now, obviously, we probably want to hold until we know that we've got the funds to hire for that position, but just, is there a timeline or thinking with respect to the creation of a job description? Is that something that's been created already?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Fennell on that.
There is a job description. We'll need to work with HR to possibly amend it somewhat, so we will probably be creating a separate job description, but the general principles of what is currently in place is what we'll need.
Okay, and in the event that we have the resources to carry out with bringing that position on, what is your expected timeline or vision in terms of onboarding an individual, or being able to be positioned to make an offer or at least do a posting?
It would be after we have our database in place, because they'll be utilizing the database to process the information. So I would not want to necessarily have an analyst on board, and that's a part-time, that's coming in. I perceive that as being a part-time position coming in, and we could maybe look next year to see if there's a need to make it full, but initially I'm looking at that as a part-time position.
Okay, so realistically,
End of July, or
at the earliest?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Richards, for your report out. I see on item number 7, I have an executive session. Is this from you, Ms. Richards, because it says Human Resources?
It is not. I believe that's from Mr. Fennell about the intern.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
What?
Mr. Gippen, how do we need to motion this?
We would need to move to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. It takes a roll call. We normally have told the public and the press whether if we intend to take action after the executive session. Up to you, Mr. Chairman. I would think we would do that after we've concluded any other business.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna move that to, and now go to Vice Chair's comments. Ms. Anaskevich.
Oh, okay, thank you, yes. I wanted to, this month marks our second year as the CPOB board, and I just wanted to be gracious towards the public. And, you know, I know that we get a lot of emails, and there are some people who don't understand what we've been doing, what we've done, and that type of thing. So I thought it prudent to just give a quick review of our journey of what we've had as a CPOP board. So I thank the people for being here and the people who are online. And I'm going to read it because I don't want to forget what I want to say. I don't want to leave anything out. So I'm going to read what I wrote. Good evening, board and the community. In our last meeting, those of us who were appointed to this CPOB board were asked if we wanted to remain on the board. Myself and Mr. Bob Gippen stated we desired to stay on the board, and I was then subsequently voted to remain as vice chair. Mr. Gippen and I were appointed for 2 years, and everyone else for 4 years. I wanted to take this time to share our past 2-year journey with the public. Being on this board these past 2 years has been quite the experience. None of us knew each other when we started, and it was a real challenge learning both one another's personalities, skill sets, strengths, and weaknesses, and where to use them or not to use them, while simultaneously learning how to build a CPOB board that the city of Akron had never had before. This was not easy, and we had many learning curves, internal and external obstacles, influences, and setbacks to overcome. Nevertheless, we forged ahead steadfast, determined to meet our objectives as best we could or knew how. This journey was not always pleasurable, but it most certainly has been an honor and a privilege to service the citizens of Akron and the Akron Police Department. with commitment and resolve. And we are still learning. Knowing some of us have and will leave this board one day, personally, I never wanted to do so without knowing we accomplished something worthwhile and meaningful that would move this city, its citizens, and our board forward in a positive direction. For me, thus far, that accomplishment is having hired our auditor, Mr. Anthony Furnell. He is doing a fantastic job. Mr. Furnell has staffed his office with the best people in Ms. Keisha Myers as his deputy auditor and Shannon Thompson as his administrative assistant. I take comfort in knowing as this board moves forward that we have Mr. Anthony Furnell and his staff doing the hard work required to help make our work meaningful, stellar, and worthwhile in helping to make Akron, Ohio, a welcoming, safe city for its citizens and for the police department that serves us all. However, so much more needs to be done. That said, my message to this board is that I hope we will continue to work towards efforts that will afford us the leverage we most certainly will need in the future to make monumental change for the citizens of Akron, the Akron Police Department, and the community at large. I hope we work towards looking at charter amendment ideas for this new year, 2025. Amendments that will afford this board the power we'll need to make expected changes for the citizens of Akron, as well as the Akron Police Department. This is why we are here, and we must not lose sight of these goals. This effort will take all of us, the board in crafting the amendments, but most importantly, it will take the support and input from stakeholders and the citizens of Akron. If we achieve this goal, it will be up to the citizens to vote on said charter amendments if we get to that point, whenever the time comes. Let's try and make this a great new year for our board, the citizens of Akron, and the Akron Police Department. Our work is far from over. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anaskevich. Appreciate your words and appreciate your thoughtfulness to not only to write them, but also to read them here in this chamber for our citizens, on behalf of our board. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. At this time, I want to ask Ms. Matz up to the podium. I know she has an announcement that she would like to make as well.
And this is just a brief announcement. On February 25th, which obviously is next Tuesday, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Garfield CLC, we will be holding a community forum related to the crowd management policies of the Akron Police Department. The impetus of this was the settlement of a lawsuit, but it's, I think, a policy that needs to be addressed at any rate. It will involve not only crowd management at protests, but also crowd management in any kind of large group format, Lock 3, different festivals that occur downtown. And so we're going to have an opportunity for the community to talk to an expert that we've brought on for the purpose of evaluating the policy, evaluating the community comments, and helping to draft a whole new policy from fresh cloth, not just a revamping of the existing policy. His name is Spencer Fomby. And so I would like to invite all of you to attend. Anybody who happens to be watching, please feel free to come and attend. Again, it's February 25th, 5 to 7 p.m. at the Garfield CLC. Thank you so much.
What's the location one more time?
Garfield CLC.
Just want to make sure.
When is it again?
Whatever, that's my alma mater. Yes.
If you have any questions, please feel free.
All right, at this time, I'll make a motion for us to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters. Can I get a second?
Second.
Anaskevich?
Yes.
Gibbon?
Yes.
Peebles?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Motion approves. I don't think we're going to be voting on anything coming back from this. Yeah, possibly.
What are you gonna want?
We might be
You're gonna
voting
want us
coming
to
back.
You gonna want us to vote?
So we'll go into executive session. Thank you all. We could be possibly voting on something coming back, so everybody knows.
Do we use the microphones when we're?
No. We're out of executive session, correct? Do we got to come back on TV? Yeah, but don't we have to be back on to adjourn? Matt? Okay, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, we're not live. I'd like to make a motion to, oh, we gotta wait for,
You calling one of your kids, Matt?
Chair's comments. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Have a safe trip home. God bless you.